This is awesome. This is like one of my favorite conversations we've ever had.
I knew it was going to be like this. I was so
I had
ready.
no doubts. I was like, this is going to be great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love it.
I have a couple of questions on different things we've touched on.
Oh, shoot.
And also just like random stuff that I want to know.
Hell yeah.
Welcome to Pelvic POV with your hosts and doctors of physical therapy, Amanda Neary and Hannah Meyer.
Hey, pelvic freaks. Welcome back to another episode of Pelvic POV.
We're your freaks for us and we're freaks for your pelvis, baby.
And a very warm welcome to Dr. Lay. Welcome to Pelvic
Hi.
POV.
Thanks for having me.
How's it going?
It's going fabulous.
On this lovely
I
Saturday.
just love you ladies, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited. I've been so excited this whole freaking week for this episode.
Seriously.
Oh, that's so nice.
We wanted to talk about, well, before you were walking in, Hannah and I were just like talking about how we both met you and how like serendipitous it was for us too. Do you want to tell
I
the
love
story?
that you used serendipitous. Good word choice.
Oh, good.
No, I was talking about how the first time I met you, well, I met you through a friend, a mutual friend. Well, one of your patients
Okay.
who was my friend and was like, you need to see Dr. Lay. And it was before I met Amanda.
Yes.
Because the day I saw you for my first, we did a Reiki and Tarot session, was the day of my interview at the Pelvic Institute. So this is what happened, guys. I had an interview with Amanda to work at the Pelvic Institute. I was really nervous. Now it's funny looking back. Because I was like, why was I nervous? But I was nervous.
Makes sense at the time.
Yeah, it makes sense at the time. I was just like, I really need to impress her. But it was, I had my interview with Amanda, and then Amanda was like, oh yeah, I'm going across the street. I have an appointment at Revive. And I was like, shut up. I have an appointment at Revive. So then you went over directly after, and then I had my appointment literally right after you. So we were back to back.
It is wild.
I love that.
So funny.
And you and I met when I first started subleasing in this building. A year and a half ago. I was in the suite next door, and I had just reached out to local practitioners that I were like seemed like-minded, that we could share patients or refer people to. And we met that way. And then when I remember when I met Hannah, she mentioned you as well. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is already a connection between like the three of us.
So crazy.
And you did my pelvic floor rehab.
Yes.
Yeah, so that also helped.
And you have helped with my SI joint pain.
Yes.
Big time.
Look at us.
We all need each other.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was my first Reiki session I've ever done.
Really?
First one. And I felt so empowered afterwards. It was,
Oh, I'm so happy to
So
hear that.
I'm really excited to get into the meats and potatoes.
Oh no.
I don't know why
the plural meats.
that was so Kentucky of me.
I think that the plural meats is what threw me
It's
off.
what threw me off too.
The meats and potatoes.
I definitely hold the expression. I've just never had the beats be plural.
I don't think I've ever used that expression in my life. So I don't know why that
Well,
came
You've
out of
been
me.
really-
the meat and potatoes.
You have been really
It's the
Kentucky
Groundswell
this
coffee.
week.
Me, I have.
She's been randomly singing country music like all week. I'm like, what's going on?
Fun fact about me is that I can sing karaoke, but only in a Southern accent.
Well, I love that.
Yeah.
I love the Southern accent.
It's
Maybe
charming.
it's just because I'm so Midwest, or like always from here, been here, but I do love a South. And I love the like phrases.
Mm-hmm.
One time I was in a parking lot and we were really slow to get out because the arm wouldn't go up. And this woman, she walked up to my car and she said, this parking arm's going up and down slower than Christmas. And I was like,
It's so
it makes
friendly.
sense. Though. I mean,
yeah.
it didn't, but it does.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That's so
I
funny.
love that.
Yeah, things that I would never think of.
But to your meat and potatoes, this is random, but I just came into my mind. When I was in school, this guy kind of asked me on a date, and he asked me by like saying that we should have like dinner together and that I could bring the salad and he would bring the meat.
Interesting.
And to this day, I'm like, I think that was a euphemism, but like the whole thing was so bizarre that I was like, so don't ask anybody else that
Oh
way.
no, that should have been in our spooky sex story submission.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Yeah, dudes are weird.
Yeah.
We've been talking about dating a lot on this podcast lately too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about another weird thing that happened because we were saying how we have so many weird overlaps between us.
Mm-hmm.
This past week on Tuesday, I went randomly. One of my friends that I pole danced with was like, let's go on a ghost tour, like a haunted ghost
Oh,
tour
I love that.
in the Lincoln Park Zoo, which I didn't know was freaking haunted as crap.
I feel like all of Chicago is.
Yeah. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go on a ghost tour Tuesday night. And then I didn't speak to Amanda like all that night randomly. Like I just didn't tell her I was going to it. And then on Thursday, I think, was it Thursday?
It was Wednesday.
Oh, was it Wednesday?
the
The day
next day.
after? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, last night I went on a ghost tour. And she goes, shut up. I went on a ghost tour last night.
Like, so, like, what are the odds?
It was so odd. We both went on ghost tours in Lincoln Park, and we were just literally at like a location a block away from each other.
Wow.
The one night we like aren't telling each other what we're doing. Like we talk every day because we see each other every day,
Sure.
but then also like we have the podcast, so
Yeah.
we're just like always in communication.
I didn't tell her what I was like, she doesn't need to know. She didn't care. She ended up doing the same thing
It was
as
one
me.
of those things where like as she was saying it, I was like, am I saying this out loud? Because she was like, I went on a ghost tour in Lincoln Park last night. And I was like, what do you mean? That's what
so-
I did. But it made me think of you because I feel like we had a conversation once about you feeling weird in Lincoln Park or like you feel
I don't like Lincoln Park. No disrespect.
No, those I
But
get,
it's-
I get
yeah.
a weird
Is it the
feeling too, and I don't
Weird.
know
I don't
why.
like Lincoln Park and I don't like Wrigleyville.
Mhm.
interesting.
And there's also spirit in this building.
I know,
but
I talked about that because I'm not sensitive.
There's like a male energy on the stairs for sure. I don't feel anything creepy about it, but
Yeah.
but yeah. But Lincoln Park, I don't know what it is, but it's just never, the vibe's always been weird to me. And Wrigleyville, I have seen the weirdest stuff. Like people like, you know, I mean, there's the Cubs games and people are drinking, but I saw like an adult, like 40-year-old something woman, like beating the shit out of her boyfriend on the street one
Oh my
time.
God.
And then I saw a couple arguing and I walked past them and they were like sobbing. And one of them was like, you haven't been the same since they died. So it was like one of those conversations. I was like, this should be private. And I'm walking by it. But,
Mhm.
and I saw like a girl screaming at a guy in a motorized wheelchair. I mean, none of that though. What I theorize is I think that in some of those pockets where you might get like, again, no disrespect, but like bro culture,
Mhm.
I think there is a lot of abusive alcohol use, abusive emotional environment, and sexual abuse,
Mhm.
and probably other drug abuse and things like that. And I just feel like it's thick
Mhm.
in
And
the
you can
air.
feel it when
You
you
can-
go there.
Yeah.
Like I went to brunch up in Lincoln Park the other day and I was walking around and I was just like, why do I not vibe as well here as I do when I'm
Mhm.
walking around in West Town, West Loop, or like Wicker?
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm a west side of the city girly.
Yeah.
I'm like
I think
always
I've
gravitating.
been
and it's,
changed.
yeah.
But I wanted to ask you because whenever I'm up on like Armitage
Yeah.
in Lincoln Park
Oh, I do like
specifically,
Armitage,
I
though.
love it there. Like I
Yeah.
don't really like the rest of Lincoln Park that much, but when I'm there, I'm like, this feels like home. But then I learned it's like literally the most haunted neighborhood in the country.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't know
the most
that.
active. And
I
I'm like,
wonder-
what does that
maybe that's why I
mean?
don't
That I
like it.
feel like energetically good
Good
there.
there.
That's kind of weird, right?
Maybe you're a spooky girl at heart.
Maybe I'm not sensitive also. Maybe that's why, because I don't
Yeah.
pick up on that energy.
I feel
but,
like everybody has like the ability to be sensitive. It's just how open or like, you know,
Interesting.
and belief is like a big part of it. But
Mm.
that's really interesting. I also, though, have to say, just for full disclosure, like my relationship, I'm like 10 years older than you guys, about.
Mhm.
And so when I was like the most actively around Lincoln Park, it's like 2010, 11, 12.
yeah,
Mm,
different time.
And so it's like pop collars were in.
Mhm.
Remember dudes would wear like the double collar?
Mhm. Kind
So
of.
that's what
Now
I think
I
of when
do.
I think of that area.
New memory
I'm
unlocked.
like, popped collars. And I don't know, but I didn't know that. That's interesting. It is a beautiful area, and I could see where it feels nice to like raise a family in that area. But my experience there is like someone going out to bars and stuff. I just
Yeah.
never felt. I was more like Wicker Park,
Mhm.
Logan Square.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I do
those
love
are
that's
going
good.
out
more
Logan
where I
Square.
like to be.
Yeah, those feel more homey now.
Mhm.
It does.
sure.
I didn't even mean for that to happen. I just always liked the people and going out in these areas, and
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
kind
Same.
of happened.
I always wanted to like be in West Loop, and then my life circumstances just made it happen.
Yeah.
And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, here we are.
Look
I love
the
it.
same.
That's
This is
great.
great.
Literally the same.
I love that.
I feel like this chat kind of is a nice segue into what we're going to talk about today.
Sure.
We're getting a little woo woo right off the bat, which I love. I'll formally introduce you to our pelvic freaks here. So everyone, this is Dr. Callista Lay, and she owns Revive Chiropractic Healing Center, which is actually across the street from where we are right now at the Pelvic Institute.
Yes.
Whoop, whoop.
We're like legit neighbors.
Neighbors.
I love it.
Yes.
I know sometimes I walk to get coffee at Groundswell and then Em will text me and be like, I see you.
One time I saw you and I'm like a 13-year-old boy at heart. So I like the urge to just open the door and yell your name was so strong. But I was like, I might scare her. Doesn't look really professional either. But
yeah, I would love it. Next time, please do.
It happens. So do you want to give us a little your take on your background and like how you like to approach care and what you're doing these days? And then we can kind of get into the meat of the subject.
Yeah. So Dr. Callista Lay is my name on the streets. It's not my legal name because I'm married now, but I kept the last name. Chiropractic physician, acupuncturist by degree. And then I do like my specialty focus and my main like passion work is the intuitive healing that I do. I always use the word intuitive because that feels like more encompassing to me. And I don't like to set anybody up for like an expectation around what that session should be like, but I definitely, that's like my passion work. So I've been practicing chiropractic and acupuncture for 12 years now.
Nice.
No, is that right? Yeah, going on 12 years. Mm-hmm. And then I've been doing Reiki and Tarot professionally for probably like 7 of those years, but personally tarot reading for over a decade. I think also in what I've come to understand about myself and how I work is I think I was doing like Reiki naturally long before I had like a system of understanding and a training around it, which this is totally like a segue I could go into, but I really think that like some of these types of energy works can just kind of flow through people so naturally. Mm-hmm. But the ego really loves education and structure and being able to be like, here's my certificate, I did it. Yeah. So yeah, I have been in the chiropractic industry since I was 15 though. Okay. So I worked for a chiropractor from the time I was 15 till I graduated and worked in her clinic for a while before transitioning to the city. And then similar like to you, I don't know, you mentioned how you kind of got into the West Loop after wanting to be, I didn't really even know a thing. My mom was just like, there's this great spot. It looks beautiful. She knew somebody that used to she knew somebody who knew somebody that had the lease there at the time and they were happy to like transition. Yeah. So I just sort of like most things in my life, I just am living and spirit's like, this is what you're doing now. And I'm like, this is what I'm doing now. And it's great. I wouldn't change it. I'm so happy with this location, and being the practice owner has really allowed me to evolve like how I want to practice and what I want to do. So it was really important for me to continue to have chiropractic and acupuncture. I don't ever want anyone who's not spiritual to feel like alienated, like they can't come into my business. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we're forcing on people, it's just something that's like, and if you also are open to or interested in learning about this, we have this space for you. And I find that I am an attractive practitioner for people who, like I kind of say, I feel like I'm like a bridge. Like I'm good for the people who are like, I'm interested, I'm open, I want to learn more, but some of the people that are out there are like too out there for me. Mm-hmm. So I think the fact that I have this like logical mind and I like research and I'm well read and I have a degree as a doctor helps people feel this more groundedness in how then I approach spiritual work. Because I think all things are spiritual and like we might not be of this world, but we're in this world, but like we're in this world. Like there's not a dismissal of allopathic medicine or psychological care. It's like these things all complement each other. And so I just loved having this, like, my goal is to have a true mind, body, spirit center. And I would like to evolve to even having like a psychologist on staff and it really be a place where it's like, whether you're looking for physical medicine, mental health, or emotional support, like it's all part of the picture and it's all there.
I love that.
Yeah.
So I think everything you just described is what drew me to your practice as well. That's
awesome.
Which is really cool. So you get really unique, cool patients, I feel like that way.
I love that.
Oh my God.
Anna's self-identifying as unique and cool.
I didn't even mean to do that, but that does include me.
It does. No, it's so true. I do. And I get to meet like really incredible people. And, it's so interesting. I think like part of me I've always been drawn to spirituality. I have always been spiritual. Like I even remember I love my husband so much, and I joke with him that when he's in a good mood, he's agnostic, and when he's in a bad mood, he's atheist. It just depends on the day. And when we met, he was like, I'm atheist, and I'm like, that's cool. Like, as long as you're accepting and you're not trying to like shame me or tell me what I'm doing is not right. Like, you believe what you believe. I personally believe all paths lead to God, even the godless path. So that's just my personal belief. But God to me is like universe, spirit, source.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, you do what you got to do, whatever you're meant to do in this lifetime. But as we've gotten together, he's kind of evolved a little bit more in that. But I don't even know why I went on this tangent.
Yeah, that's okay. I love it.
I mean, that was kind of my next question, was just sharing how you got into this side of things.
That's
kind
where I was
merging
going.
the two.
Like, I think kind of like first how you chose to go the chiropractic route, and then how you started to combine
Great
the
question.
two together,
I always love when people are like, how'd you get here? And I'm like, so it all started on May 28th of 1987.
So I was born on this date.
But so I got into chiropractic initially, like going to work for a chiropractor, because like most young teens, I was 15, and I'm like, doctor's offices have to pay you better than like a food place. So I went and started working there. And then I just slowly realized I was really good with people. I just had a natural, I like to gab. I can connect with all types of people. And it just always felt really easy for me. And then as I got a little older and like had proved a little bit more maturity, the doctor was like, can you just go like massage this person's like back or forearm? Like, reflecting on it now, I'm like, would I let a 16-year-old massage one of my patients? But I think also it has to be dependent on the 16-year-old, and I was mature. So, and patients were like, whoa, you are really good. You just like,
your touch is good.
Yes. And so when I just got older and I was getting ready to graduate and go into education, I wanted to be a massage therapist. And I love massage therapy, and I think it has a lot of value. So let's like asterisk that I believe that before you hear this next part. I'd worked for a male doctor. And at the time when I told him that, he was like, why wouldn't you be a doctor? And he was a hard ass. He's passed, so like rest his soul. But I remember like thinking like, if this asshole thinks I can be a doctor, like I could probably be a doctor. And I was fortunate that the two doctors I worked for most constantly were women, and they were married and they had kids. And so I was like, I can do it all. Like I can have the high professional degree. I can have the family, like, fuck yeah. And they all think I can do it. So that was that. And I decided to be a chiropractor, and I never thought twice about it. I definitely always have been drawn to helping people, but I also knew that I am an only child, and I was raised with a mom who worked in the airline industry. So the intellectual aspect of like, there's a lifestyle I'd like to live. So I also wanted to have like a career that I knew I could support myself with. So that's kind of how I got there. The spiritual stuff, always. I mean, I grew up in a house that had a spirit in it. I would see it. Sometimes lights would turn on when you weren't in the room. I mean, the list is long. I won't make you listen to all the tales, but many things
I want to hear about it eventually, though.
It was like a 120-year-old farmhouse.
Wow. Okay.
And so harmless, but just like somebody I think that maybe had passed in the home or had lived in the home or something. And I remember in grade school, like me and another girlfriend kind of led this whole, like we had to have a ghost club. We were like so into the paranormal, witchy.
So fun.
We're in Catholic school, like reading about being Wiccan, and like all that stuff. But then when I got to high school, I think it just didn't seem like it was cool, And I was friends with a lot of people, and I was like really into this like emo, screamo scene, and that evolved into like hardcore metal music scene. And there just were a lot of strong personalities that like if they thought something was wacky or weird, like you're fucking weird. It's bullshit, And so I just kind of let it go. I wanted to fit in. I had a lot of anxiety.
That's like a lot of high school experiences, I feel like.
I feel like a lot of people that like people who are sensitive too, like people identify as empaths can definitely tell you like I had a lot of depression and anxiety. I just had this like, I just wanted to fit in. And I think every high schooler can relate to that.
Like when I lived in Kentucky and I was in high school, I was bright blonde. Like everyone was blonde in Kentucky. I had I feel like now living in Chicago, I've stepped into my own self, I guess.
Yes.
And felt comfortable with being myself.
Yes.
And I'm 26 now, and I feel like that's just now happening to me.
Yeah. It takes a long time. And then like, I feel like you'll feel that even more again as you move into 30. And then it's this constant evolution into comfortability in who you are. But at that time I didn't have it in my early 20s, but I started to get interested. My mom took me to a tarot reader, go to church on Sunday and our tarot reader on Monday. It was very confusing, but she took me to tarot reader and astrologist. I always was like interested in it, and drawn to it. And then around around like 25, 26, I just decided to get myself a tarot deck and start and I approached it very academically, where like I studied all the cards and I read all their meanings and like took notes on it. And then would read more for myself. And then around 27, I had a health scare that I like ended up having to go to the emergency room. I wasn't like a near-death experience, but it was scary enough for me, and I had required an ambulance that in the moment at the time, like I thought I was going to die. And I remember having those thoughts of like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Like these things aren't even in alignment with who I am. And I feel like it just kind of shook me up. And then after that, I was like, oh, I got to like make changes. And I pursued Reiki training. And when I pursued Reiki training, I started to have experiences where I remember I was standing in the lobby of the clinic I was working in at the time, and there was a patient like maybe like, 10 feet across from me and I was waiting to call her back in, and I just heard in my mind, she's pregnant. And I'm like, weird, okay. And then I take her in the room and she's like, I have to tell you, it's really way too early to even tell you this, but I'm 4 weeks pregnant. And and like another thing happened similar where I was looking at this guy and this thought comes into my mind that's like, you should ask him about his cat. And at the time, now I follow those things. I don't ignore it. But at the time I was like, fucking weird. I'm not going to ask him about his fucking cat. Like what? And he's like, I'm really bummed out. My 6-month-old kitten just died.
Oh.
And so I started to I'm like, this stuff is like real. Like I'm not making it up. And so then I started, just applying more of like, what does this look like if I'm offering sessions? What does it look like if I'm doing it professionally? What does it look like if I just trust that I'm not like any better or worse than all the other people that are out here offering this? So why don't I try? And through that experience of starting to do more energy work, and then when I do energy work on people, I'll receive a lot of information about them. Like usually for me, my strongest senses are knowing or visuals or feeling. And so I just through that, and then like telling people what I perceive without having a lot of information ahead of time, and them having like profound experiences just helped me realize like this shit is really real.
Yeah.
I'm really doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of how I got where I am. And it's also like what I love. It's like what I'm passionate about. So I still love doing chiropractic, and acupuncture is energy medicine. So of course I love that.
Yes.
But I'm really passionate about helping people feel like empowered in their life. Like I feel like everybody deserves that.
That's awesome.
And all the reasons most people don't feel empowered are completely bullshit and have been projected onto us, whether it's like capitalistic society, government, family, friends, So I'm like, all that's bullshit. Like, let's just help people. Because if people are happy, like I feel like then the world would be better.
Yeah.
Not to be cheesy about it, but
no, for real.
So that's kind of like
facts.
I think I always had this sense like of wanting to do something really impactful in the world. And then I was like, okay, well, realistically, like I'm not reinventing the wheel by myself. I have no grand ideals of government and politics or whatever. So I'm like, how can I as one individual change the world? And I'm like, well, I can help people feel better in their lives. And then they can like that butterfly effect.
I will say, even talking to you, I feel, when you talk to some people and then after you leave that conversation, you feel so drained.
Yeah.
I feel like every time I talk to you, I always feel very like
I love that.
energized and uplifted. So
That's awesome.
I definitely feel it too,
Cool.
which is great.
Thank you. So that's really nice.
Yeah.
I would like hope to have that. I mean, I definitely have my days. I'm human at the end of the day. But when I'm tending to myself and taking care of myself, I feel like people do really like connecting with me, and they do leave interactions feeling like a sense of positivity. I'm definitely an optimistic realist though. Like at the end of the day, I'm a realist, but I am optimistic because why not?
Because wait, you're a Gemini Sun, Leo rising, right?
Yeah, and
because
moon.
I am a Gemini Sun, Leo rising, and then I have a Pisces moon.
I'm a Gemini moon.
Oh damn! Look at
How's that anxiety treating you?
it's
take it day by day.
Yeah. The mind just never stops, Sometimes it's a blessing. And sometimes
is that
it's
a Gemini moon thing for real? Because I literally cannot stop.
And Gemini moon, like intellectualizing of emotions. So I tend to I'm always trying to think my way into feeling better.
Wow.
Or I'm always trying to mentally process or ruminate, review. But we're also we feel most emotionally comforted, supported when we're intellectually stimulated as well.
This makes sense. That's interesting.
Yeah. And Gemini energy is very community orientated. So you probably also feel like the best when you are connected to your community and doing things for your community.
Yes.
And especially with your Aries placement, when you get to do that from a place of leadership.
Wow.
Yeah.
This all makes sense.
I can tell you all your secrets.
Yeah, I actually do want, like, I do tarot a good amount, but I want like a chart reading. Like, I want someone to tell me about my chart.
I have a referral for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, because I don't do that. I'd love to.
I would love to do a full like set professional
chart reading.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll give you guys her name.
It's so cool.
Perfect.
No, I mean, this stuff, I mean, to your point, like, yes, the ego loves tactile things and degrees. And
yes,
I mean, we all look for that in certain things in life, but this work is just as real as organized religion is to other people.
Exactly.
And no one questions that as a thing. Like, we all study world religions. It's just, it's like there's factual things associated with it. So I feel like the second someone's like, oh, I do this energy work. Oh, why would you pay for energy work? That's not real. It's like, you're still, even if you didn't believe it was real, you're going to leave that room and something's going to benefit you from being in that space and spending that time working on yourself. And I just feel like that's my take on it. I'm like, if you're believing that you're going for a service and it's helpful to you and you're getting reflection out of it, how is that not helpful and real?
100%. And I notice this is an experience that I have a lot personally, and then I have a lot happen to me, which is people come into a session, even people who are not there for spiritual work. They come in for chiropractic. They sit down in the room and they're like, "Why am I crying?" You know, like just looking at me. And I'm like, I have that effect on people.
Get used to this.
Get used to it. It's not a good session if they didn't cry. No, but I also have had that experience too. Thinking back, I think I cried when I was in your session. I mean, and I love to joke about it and be like, I have that effect on people, or Em and I will joke, you know, it wasn't a good day for Dr. Lay if someone didn't cry. But in reality, what is really happening, like, that's all just a joke. The moment you as a person, an individual, decide that like it is a yes for you to be invested in your healing, the healing begins. So like people just even stepping into the space have this emotional moment because they're already energetically releasing and moving things through them. And I remember the woman that did my Reiki master training, she does shamanic work, and I went to one of her like tobacco prayer circles, and it was like just walking in, I started crying. And again, and I was talking with her about it, and she was like, it's because like you've already said yes to the invitation of healing, and the space is just like this open space where like the process has begun. So to your point, like even just going into it open-minded has started this journey for you that I think, you know, in Western culture especially, we are so, what is energy medicine? Whereas like you look at traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and like they're like energy is just as valuable as your blood, your nervous system. It's really kind of more of a Western world thing where we've kind of disconnected from that. And I could go on so many rants about how I think colonization has played into that, and like this uprooting and disheveled disconnection from our ancestral roots. And like, I know when I was briefing for this, one of the questions, I kept seeing the word witch in there, and you guys are asking about my story. And it's so funny because like the identification of witch has been placed on me more than I've ever claimed my own. Now that I'm at this point in my life, I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm a witch. Like, yeah. I don't do baneful magic though, so no worries. I'm only doing light work over here.
Do you identify as a witch?
I do now, yes.
Okay.
But it took me a really long time to be comfortable with that because I grew up in the Catholic Church, but also back to this commentary on this like disconnection from my ancestry. Like my mom did her ancestral blood work, you know. She found out she had a half sister, so be careful. But she also found out that she is pretty much Scottish, Irish, Welsh. And in Scotland, they had some of the largest persecution of witchcraft, like over 2,000 people, which is like the largest of all
What was it here?
I don't know, but it wasn't that high. And it's so funny because like we were just watching Agatha all along the other night, and my husband was like, oh, Salem, like how many people? And I'm like, it was only like 5 or 7 women. Like it wasn't excessive, but that is a lot if you think about how small the community was at that time. But so I just think, and there's like there was just a lot of taboo-ness around it in my life, and there's so much misunderstanding if you say that you're like a witch, and what that means different things to different people, because there are people who are like, I'm a witch, and then they start going into Wiccan, and that's more of like a religious system where like I don't have a religious system. I'm very comfortable with the word God because of my upbringing in the Catholic Church. But even like in the Catholic Church, you know, I'm in 2nd grade and I'm like, why are we right and everyone else is wrong? Like, I don't get that, you know? And so the witch thing though has become far more comfortable for me in like, one, I'm like, well, if this is what everyone is seeing in me, like, I want to ponder what that is. And then the other thing too is I realized I have always had a feeling that like I find God the most in nature. I find God the most in the sunset and the sunrise and connecting with other people. And that's where like divinity lives the most to me. And I think religion is beautiful, but I think it's man-made. And I'm not saying that there aren't things about it that are wrong or that it's wrong for people to believe in religion. I think everybody finds the belief system that is right for them. It just, to me, there's too much ego in it. And I also prefer like a personal practice. So even in like witch work, it's very personal. But even in witch work for me, it's like, I just like to ponder on like what things I should be reflecting on based on the time of year it is, or like what intentions I should be setting. And like I do like to do some protection spells and manifesting, but that's like it. I'm not doing love magic. I'm not cursing people. It's really just, it's not really hexing. All just about me feeling good in my life and feeling in ease and in flow. Like I'm not resisting and fighting and trying to make things come that aren't meant to come. It's all about like healing.
Yeah. I think witchcraft too, like even waking up in the morning and showering, you can make that a ritual. You can make that a spell almost. Like doing my makeup routine can almost be like a spell.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be like a full on like lighting the candles and like everything every time. Do I do that sometimes? Yes. I 100% do rituals like that sometimes. But the little things can be spells, just being intentional behind things you're doing.
It's all intention and will, all of it at the end of the day. And so, you know, when people get into that question of like, is it real? Is it not? I'm like, it's just a physical manifestation of your intention.
Yeah.
Like, do I believe that because I lit this candle with lavender on it, I'm going to meet the love of my life? Like, I don't know. But I surely don't think it hurts to have a physical representation of my desire. And that's what witchcraft, I think, is.
That's a cool way to think
it's a really beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. And
I love it. I mean,
we've been doing a lot more moon rituals.
We do our like moon. I'm basically the same way. I like a manifestation. I like a full moon.
And it's like when we had our manifestation the other night, we did a manifestation. I keep saying the other night. It has been like 5 months at this point.
Is this the time's not real. So we did it on Lionsgate Portal.
But yeah, Lionsgate, that was like 8/8. Yeah. So when we did Lionsgate Portal, for example, but we literally we were sitting there and we were being intentional and we journaled out where we see ourselves. And that's just like goal setting and
that's just
making sure we're on track. And like, that's how it comes to be at the end of the day, is being intentional in the moment and being present and just looking towards the future and not looking back towards the past.
100%.
I think witchcraft is so real that I'm like, we gotta put respect on this name. Like I've had men be like, "You're a witch," like,
and they laugh about it, and then they're
like, and I'm like, "Thank you."
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is that am I insulted by that? You're right.
Am I supposed to? No, they're like they mean different things by it.
Yeah, actually, what's funny is like
they don't mean it as a compliment.
On my Hinge,
maybe
on my Hinge profile, it's like, "What's your self-care routine?" And I said like, charging my crystals and casting spells. And I like put that on there, like actually being serious, but people commented on it all the time. They're like joking. They're like, "Oh, like you're a witch." I'm like, "Yeah, I am."
Like, I'm actually serious.
They're like, "This is actually legit."
I know.
I'm not kidding.
I saw something recently that was like, why have we been taught to be afraid of the women that were persecuted for witchcraft and not the men that burned them?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's such a good point, because like those people were just minding their business and y'all literally burnt them publicly. And like that mob mentality, like that scares me more than
terrifying.
Anything. And everything is intention and what you allow in. So people get like, I've had people come into me. There's also like a lot of predatory practitioners out there. So, you know, I do the channel healings, I do the tarot, and I do the Reiki, as well as chiropractic, obviously. But I've had people come in and they're like, "Oh, I went to a tarot reader, like, and they told me that someone put a curse on me. And if I don't pay for this like $800 candle, like it'll never be lifted." And I'm just like, to those kind of comments, I'm like, people can project energy onto you. It's not always curses. People can project when they're jealous onto you. They can, you know, like we're constantly moving through the world, bumping into people and exchanging these energies, right? But I'm like, what you allow in, like I don't allow that in. I also find it ridiculous to tell somebody like you have to have $600 candle.
Yeah, no way.
Come on.
Yeah.
But it's like the people you hang out with at the end of the day. Like I've definitely had some past friendships that it's like a jealousy thing, or just like the energy is not it's not great. And it's at the end of the day, it's who you surround yourself with. Being at this practice, I feel so much more powerful every day. I don't feel like I'm being held back at all. And I feel like we're always uplifting each other, and that's how it should be. And like the people I surround myself with in the present day, but in the past, I've definitely had situations like that where it's been like very draining, or you feel held back, and that's kind of almost like a curse in a way. It's like you're accepting that negative energy if you continue to hang out with those same people. And you're subconsciously going to start feeling worse and worse about yourself, I feel like.
100%. And I also really love to use the tarot to reflect on like the year I'm going to have, or the year I have had. So you can use like numerology of like your birthday. So like 2020, for me, the numerology would have been like May 28 plus 2020, because my birthday's May 28. And I realized I was having a sun year, just like so many people think is just this like beautiful rebirth, vitality. And like there's definitely that in there. But that was also the year that I ended like 3, like almost 12 plus year friendships. And I love those women still to this day. I wish them the best. I miss them. It didn't feel healthy for me. It didn't feel like, I just felt that there was tension, that there was animosity, that there was probably some shit talking. Like, and I'm human. I'm not saying I didn't engage in that either. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm still always working on myself. But I realized like, it was just like I saw it. And that's really what the sun is to me. It's the illumination of what was once in the dark. And it's like, I see it now and I can't go back to what it was. Like, I have to let this go. I love them. I wish I would have spoken more, because Gemini, baby. I'm like, bye, cut and run. You know, and now I'm better about that. I'm better about that now. Now I'm like, let's have the vulnerable conversation. Let's have closure. I have some regret that I didn't do that with them. But I now realize though, like the moving out of that energy. And it's so interesting to me that like I then in quick succession had 3 kids, you know, and I had twins like within less than a year of getting rid of those
I just got chills.
Right. And I got married, and that was actually the same year that I decided like I'm a fucking witch and I'm not going to be shy about it anymore. And it is who I am, and it is what I believe. And if people can have like group prayer, like then I can be comfortable with what I believe and being honest about who I am. And I'm not asking anybody to buy anything that they aren't into. So
I feel like this makes me think, if I have ever heard one phrase that has rung true, like time and time again, it's that your new life will cost you your old one.
100%.
And I'm like, getting deeper into my spiritual journey has been the most true for all of that. Because it's like, like when you watch a TikTok about it, it's like sunshine and rainbows. You can manifest your reality, the universe. But if you're actually doing that work, like all your shit is going to come up.
It gets dark.
And you have to address every single thing face on.
You've done a complete change since I met you.
No.
You're like a whole new person now.
Totally.
Like,
I feel like a whole new person.
But like you've gone through a lot of evolution.
Yeah.
And I say to people all the time, like, if this stuff was easy, everybody'd be healed.
Totally.
It's not easy. Love and light is bullshit. Like, you should show up with love and compassion, but you have to be willing to sit in your shadow and in the dark and uncomfortable places. And like, you have to learn how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, it's really hard work.
And I love that you mentioned earlier, now I'm going back to your other point about bringing like a psychologist on at some point, or someone to do mental health services. Because I feel like I've been in therapy for years. I've had numerous different therapists for different reasons, like whether it was like family, relationship, personal, whatnot. But I'm with therapists now that I feel like I'm really getting somewhere. And I feel like the spiritual component helped like unlock a lot of things that I was like, okay, these are things that I actually should address in like multiple ways in life. And I feel like they go hand in hand. Like you kind of need both.
Yes.
And it's cool that you're going to maybe create that access to both.
Yeah, and I do. I really feel like, you know, so in my practice, if someone comes in for a chiropractic session, it's not like I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, your low back pain. Well, have you ever been cheated on? Like, I'm not, I'm like, all right, cool. Let's assess, you know what I mean? But I'm like, let's assess you. And usually for me, how it works is, if it's physical, if it's structural, if I can tell that there's, you know, I'm like, awesome. Let's maybe do acupuncture, maybe dry needling, maybe I refer over to you guys, or maybe I have them work with the massage therapist. We adjust them. And for most people, that's good and they're feeling better. But for the people that, if I had a woman, I'll never forget, I worked with her for a month, upper back pain, chronic neck pain every day. a weekly cupping ultrasound adjustment, no improvement. I'm like, this isn't structural. There's no way. Like, there's no way we wouldn't have even an iota.
Yeah.
So I remember I looked at her and I was like, do you think that this pain is stress? And she just started sobbing. And I'm like, boom, let's do acupuncture. I wasn't doing Reiki at the time. And she came in the next visit, all her pain was gone. Just that moment of recognition and connection for her was all she needed. And that gives me like the chills.
Yeah.
But now in my practice, people either seek out readings with me or they never even explore that side of my practice, or they come in because they like that I do that. To your point of it being all connected, even if they're not personally interested, they like to know that they have a healthcare worker who is sitting down and is like, okay, I don't want to just know that you hurt your back last week. I want to know the whole story. And they can feel comfortable to tell me, my girlfriend broke up with me unexpectedly. I am changing jobs and and I'm like, okay, so we know that this is not just physiological. It's also mental, emotional, and then we can treat it more holistically. And that's what, it was funny because I've been told by a lot of people throughout my whole career that I'm a holistic caregiver. And I always was like, but I don't do nutrition and supplements. And now I'm like, oh my God, it's because I treat the mind, body, and spirit. And that's what I think is like missing in healthcare, especially like the allopathic model. And I always, whenever I'm talking about this stuff, love to give my little like just public service announcement of like, I am not saying that Reiki can cure your cancer. I'm not saying don't go to your psychiatrist, like do those things. That stuff is just as important and just as powerful. But I feel like the Western model misses those moments of holding you a bit more, because most healthcare, unless we're in private practice like us, it's corporation.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even us at the end of the
100%.
day,
Yeah.
I have bills to pay.
We work for the system.
Yeah.
Really, like there's no other way to do it. We
There's
still,
no other way to do
at
it.
the end of the day have to generate revenue. We have to like get
Yes.
clients a certain way. So
Yes.
you can be the best out there, but you're still working in America under capitalism.
And I think it's just so important for people to have spaces like us where they can go and they can say like, okay, I am treating my depression. I do go to my therapy. But I still have a high profile job and I'm expected to excel and like I have stress. Or, sometimes people come to me like more for coaching, like spiritual coaching, or sometimes they come just to work through big life transition. A lot of times the thing I hear most commonly is like, if I do a reading, is like, this is exactly what my therapist told me. And I'm like, that's crazy because I don't know what you talk to your therapist about,
Yeah.
But I think there's such a nice marriage and parallel. And just back to like the chiropractic side of things though, I am shocked at the amount of times like I just simply have to explain to patients what their imaging meant because their doctors are not telling them about it.
Yeah.
So they're like uninformed about what is even going on in their body. And I think if you think about that in relating it to spiritual stuff, how many people are like uninformed about what's even going on in their mental and emotional body? Because our world just isn't encouraging of slowing down and taking time to sit with it.
We get comments from patients all the time too, and we're in a different setting. So ours are usually coming from OBs or gynecologists that have left out information that was really helpful to their care, or they didn't know pelvic floor therapy existed, and they're like 6 months postpartum. And it's just like, how are we falling through these cracks?
How I know, and like I'm so grateful for the team that delivered my kids. Both of my pregnancies were like considered high risk, even though one was just because of my age, but which I'm like, I hate that, but it is what it is. I'm really grateful for the care that they give me, but it is really interesting to watch this model where like I had to go in once a month and then I had to go in twice a month at the end there. And like in the last month before delivery, it was like weekly. And then it's like, great, you had your babies.
Yep.
We'll see you one time in 6 weeks.
Bye.
And I left the hospital with my first pregnancy with preeclampsia that wasn't like diagnosed because I have Hashimoto's, so my blood pressure is normally lower than normal. And so when I left the hospital at not clinically diagnostic of preeclampsia,
but it was higher than your normal.
it was like 140 over. And so that Friday I woke up 170. I've never felt so terrible in my whole life. 170 over like 90 something. And it's not their fault by any means. That's the nice thing about being in healthcare. Like it's practice for a reason, and you're just trying to do like a puzzle and put pieces together. It's like, I don't blame anybody, but I'm just like, I just feel like that kind of nurturing of like women like after they deliver kind of falls flat. And I just, as a chiropractor too, it just makes me absolutely crazy that every woman is not prescribed pelvic floor therapy immediately.
Yeah.
Or they
would
are
say-
going to PT, but they're not doing any internal work. And I'm like, dude, what? Like
Yeah.
your whole cradle of your core is fucked right now.
Totally.
Go get help. Like,
Yeah, I mean, that's been the large driver of this practice because when I worked in the UK, everyone was referred.
Mhm.
I worked in the NHS and they just had this like automatic referral system for postpartum
Yeah.
people, and
Yeah.
we don't have that here. So that is the underlying why of the Pelvic Institute. I'm like, we want to increase advocacy and our podcast, really. Like
Yeah.
when we started doing this, we're like, this could reach a bigger audience because it's virtual and people can watch it or listen to
Yes.
it wherever, and we can just raise awareness about this stuff.
I also think I am sure like this will resonate for you ladies, but I also think there's such a relationship for like empowering feminine sexuality in what you do,
Mhm.
which like that almost makes me want to cry, but like it relates back to like this witch work too, where it's just like, to me, this whole witch thing is like just being like, what do they say? Woman in total control of herself. Like
Mhm.
I'm confident in what I like. I'm confident in what I speak. I'm confident in my sensuality, my sexuality, how I like to receive.
Mhm.
And I think that so many women are just so disconnected from even like I know women who are in their 30s who've never looked at their vagina with a mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm like, what?
all the time.
What? Like that is,
Mhm.
you know, and I think even, I
And
think
sometimes people feel shame,
they do.
or they're like, "Oh, I don't want to look at it. I just don't want to." I'm like, "Why? This is a
Why?
part of you. It's beautiful."
yes.
Mhm.
And it is beautiful. I feel like for me, it's been really healing for me to like be with a partner who that was like after like the first time, he was like, do you know how beautiful your vagina is? He's like, I'm so lucky. And I'm like, but it's like good.
You are
Like,
lucky.
Yeah.
I know. I'm like, you are lucky. But to his point, he was like so cute because he's like, well, you never know what you're gonna get until you
Totally.
We all feel that way.
Wait, sidebar. I don't know if either of you watched this last season of Love is Blind, but in one
I
of the,
haven't yet. The most recent one.
in one of the later episodes, and this isn't a spoiler, one of the contestants, they're talking about like their sexual chemistry, and she's like, I have the best sex with someone who's obsessed with my vagina.
Yes.
And I was like, let's fucking
Yes,
go.
yes.
Mhm.
We need to be talking about that more.
Absolutely. And there's so much like related to that. Like I know women who are like, they're not that comfortable with their bodies. So they're like, you know, I mean, I've had conversations with women who are like, my partner wants a towel put down, so we can't get anything messy. And I'm like,
Mm.
sex is the most fun when it's a little messy.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
Yeah.
But everybody likes what they like, not trying to shame what people like. Maybe people are really clean kink, like good for you.
Totally.
But my point is just that I feel like all people, regardless of gender identity and what's in between their legs, struggle with comfortability in their body. I think, fortunately, women get more attention than men do in that arena. But I also think socially, there's still a lot of power around sex in the hands of men, and it's a male pleasure. And so just, I feel like there's this healing all around where if we encourage women to be more comfortable in their body and with their genitalia and their sexuality, then that reciprocally can feed into men. And there's just like a balancing and a healing that happens for everybody.
Yeah.
But
So
Yeah.
beautifully said.
thank you.
That's like when we were talking about our brand for this podcast and taking it away from who we are as people, like it is hypersexual at the end
Yeah.
of the day. Like we post some like raunchy content and it's really just, we want that message to be accessible to people. It's like you can explore this side of yourself and it's
Yeah.
cool and it's welcome here and you're safe here with us
Yes.
to talk about this stuff or
Yes.
explore it.
100%. I love that. And I think too, there's like kind of some bravery in it. That's like my sex and sexuality is like for me and like who I choose to share that with. And like, just because I have breasts doesn't mean they're for your pleasure, you know, or
Mhm.
like that's something that we've had to talk a lot about because I had an experience recently where the comment about like not wearing a bra was like uncomfortable to like the older men. And I'm like, my tits are not for your pleasure.
Yeah.
Like, I don't put a bra on some days because it hurts my body to wear a bra,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And I'm fortunate I get to raise 3 boys with a wonderful man, and they're going to learn, like, you getting to experience someone's body sexually is a gift. It's not a right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's so many golden nuggets in this conversation
There is a
already.
lot.
I love it. And we
And I
haven't
feel
even
like you're-
asked our
I know, we
questions.
haven't even really talked about
No,
how what
that's
I
why
do relates to the pelvic floor.
That's why I send this out. Like I send you like notes to write down. I'm like, just letting you know, this is just just in case we need to pull from it, but it's usually just like a free-flowing
I
conversation.
love it. It's smart to do though, because it gets your like,
and it gets your brain working beforehand.
Like
too.
I'm prepared. I felt a little like, okay, like I know what I could talk about.
Yeah.
I feel like everything you've said everything that I want to say in such a beautiful way.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
I love that, because
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I struggle to find the right words, but
And you
I
can
will say, I
tell.
will say I do have a gift with speaking in words.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so like the next thing I'm trying to manifest is like more speaking engagements than like being paid for it.
Yeah, totally.
I think that'll be like my
Totally.
40s.
Mhm.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Good goals.
Yeah.
Well, should we like talk a little bit about, okay,
Should
this
we
is
segue
crazy,
back?
but should we even say like what Reiki is for people that don't
Yes.
know what Reiki is?
Yeah,
Because I'm sure
probably.
I didn't know what it was until I went and saw Dr. Lay. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Let's
great
talk about
question.
what
I
is
always
Reiki?
love answering this question because like I'm very aware as a person who's like very grounded that it kind of sounds insane when you answer this question. But I love that. It doesn't really, but it's definitely like if I am talking to like the head of Rush and I'm like, so let me tell you about Reiki, you know.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, he probably thinks, you know, I need to be sent out. So Reiki, the belief
Not sent out.
Rush is a hospital system, by the
Yeah.
way, for people that don't know that.
I was trying to think of like a good expression and that nothing came to me. So I was like, just wrap it up, Callista.
This person needs to.
So Reiki is it's traditionally like a Japanese energy healing system. But what I believe personally is like, I think Reiki is kind of, I think like we're fortunate that Master Asui is a Japanese man that was able to provide context to make it digestible to the ego. But I think all energy healing is kind of like universal. There are probably people that don't believe that and would be like aghast at hearing me say that. But I think it's like all of the divine. And so I think it's just like Reiki is a nice like system to help your ego understand.
Mhm.
That's personally what I think. But what Reiki is the belief is that I, as the practitioner, am guiding, directing, or channeling divine or healing divine energy to you as the recipient. So there's things that we do as Reiki practitioners to prepare for a session and call in Reiki energy and like invite that to be in the space with us and to flow through us. And then we basically just through hand placements guide or direct that energy to you as the recipient. So I like to do hands-on because when I touch, that's when I'm most able to channel information quickly. Not everyone that does Reiki does readings like I do. That's like another thing I think that's important to know is that there are plenty of people who are so just continually connected to the energy work and are doing the energy work that aren't necessarily also doing like psychic medium or intuitive readings.
Mhm.
So I just like the pairing of both because I find that despite being a chiropractor, I get projected onto me a lot that I must be like medical medium style. Like, oh, how do you know about their body pain? And I'm like, no, I'm like way more likely to know that you're codependent with your mom than that you have an old ankle injury. Like chiropractically, I can assess that for sure and tell right away. But when it comes to the spiritual side, like my work is definitely I'm more naturally connected to and attuned to like what people need to upheave and heal or release in their emotional body. So for me, I love to pair the two because I like to be able to bring forward like information that is going on in their life as well as like do that energy clearing and that like chakra balancing that goes on with it. So that way they can like take that information that I brought forward and like actually apply or do something with it in a way. I feel like a lot of people, you've had a session with me, maybe you can speak, like they feel like things make sense and are like more clearer or cleaner after they've had a session. So that's what Reiki is. And I say to people all the time too, it doesn't matter your belief system. It's universal, spirit, divine. It's just this idea that this is like love being poured into you. And so it's cool if you're Catholic, Christian, Hindu, atheist. I've read my husband, when we first got together, he, I think he just liked me at the time. So he let me practice a lot of things on him. But at the time he was atheist. And I know some of his friends, he has wonderful friends. They're great men, but they're all atheists. They think I'm a snake oil salesman, but they're very kind to my face. And so at the time I remember, he let me do it on him. And he even will tell you, he felt things be pulled from his body. And ever since then, like if something is moving, he gets teary-eyed and he never would be moved like that before. So it's like, he says he felt something be pulled from his heart and his head. And it's not something that he seeks me to do. But my point in sharing that is that it doesn't matter your belief system. All it matters is like you're open to the idea that possibly something is going on. And for the people that are really kind of like, I'll say like the same thing is true about acupuncture. Like where if you come into an acupuncture session and you're like, I don't believe in this, you are probably not going to have results or as profound of results as somebody who comes in with acceptance and openness to the procedure. And I think you could say that about anything.
We literally
like the
just talked about
skeptics,
that on our episode that we dropped. We had the same conversation where I was like placebo effect and what it's been labeled, like that thinking something is going to work plays a large part in whether or not it works
100%.
or being open to it, like you said.
Yep. And I kind of got to this point where I even realized like I could marry this professional licensed degree with a spiritual practice, which I laugh even as I say that because like I love chiropractic and what I do, but like we're at the bottom of the totem pole in the medical community, unfortunately. Like not a lot of people think we're great, unfortunately. So I'm like, whether I'm doing Reiki or I'm doing chiropractic, somebody out there is telling me I'm on bullshit if I just look at the internet for one day.
For real.
But I think that's a byproduct of not everyone's good at what they do. Not a byproduct of chiropractic being flawed in nature.
Totally.
But why I brought all that up, though, is to say I remember being young in practice and feeling this, like, how do I make this duality merge? Like, how do I bring all that I am into this space? And I met this medical doctor, and her business cards were like, MD energy healer. And she has not anything published, but she is able to show you through her work, women going into breast cancer remission through not just her medical treatment as an allopathic caregiver, but also through her energy medicine and intention work that she has them do, because that's how powerful the mind is.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I feel like at my old job, like I used to work at a corporate PT company, and people would plateau, people plateau with their like recovery or their rehabilitation sometimes. And there will be some practitioners that are just like, it's just like in their head. It's just in their head. But I'm like, yeah, that is probably a really big role, but now this is a physical representation.
Yes.
So, and then I feel like in the corporate world, it's just like it's like, well, we can't really help you anymore. But I love working in a private practice where I'm right now. I'm like, I have this referral to this person. Have you tried Reiki? Have you tried acupuncture? And then also coming to PT at the same time. So we can still treat this physical manifestation in your body, but let's see if we add into this like mind, body, spirit perspective at the same time. And let's see how that can progress you further. I have patients that I treat for a long time here, and I'm like, I'm not going to give up on you. Like I'm not going to give up. You are having this pain, and I don't want to just refer you out to someone else, but I will give you this referral in addition to me helping you too.
Yeah.
And I think that's really beautiful to do here.
When I was first young working in a chiropractic office, I remember this doctor, I think he had his own brand of spirituality, but it wasn't anything that was like out there discussed or, he was chiropractor, acupuncturist, and did Chinese herbal medicine. He was great. And I remember one day he said to me, listen, I've been doing this for 40 something years. I've been working with some of the same people for those amount of times. 1 week, I could do the same thing day in and day out. 1 week they're great. Other week it's all a mess. And I think he said something like kind of flippant that was kind of like, they come in 1 week and I pour everything I got at it and they don't get any better. And the next week I just give them a handshake and they're great to go. And his point was there's only so much you can control about what goes on in their mind and their head and their life.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but I think that relates to what we're talking about of like sometimes people's progress is not just about did they do enough exercises? Did they
totally
make all their appointments? Did they take their medication?
And at the end of the day, you can't help everyone. And I think that's always a hard thing that clinicians have to overcome because we're only one piece of the puzzle.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think something that can be kind of challenging to talk about is like, do people want to be well, or are they married to their story of suffering? I don't think anybody wants to be in suffering. Don't get me wrong. But I think sometimes that narrative is so passed on our bloodline, passed down our community, whatever, that it's hard to even fathom a life outside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes you have to recognize like, there's only so much I can do.
Mhm.
Like that's what they say, right? Like when you're a healer, you just awaken the ability for someone to heal. You're not actually healing other people.
That's kind of my response when people are like, therapy should be required. And I'm always like, if we required it, the amount of people that would just be lying to their therapist or like not ready to actually address the things they need to, like, until you're ready to actually do that work, it's not going to do anything.
That's such a good point. I've always thought, I wish that therapy was required for like police department. That's a good point of like, if people aren't really interested in the work, they won't get what they need to get out of it.
Yeah.
And you can lie to your therapist.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can.
Unfortunately.
Mhm.
So it's a great point.
Yeah.
I wanted to one time and then I didn't, and I feel so proud of myself for not.
I mean, when you lie to your therapist and like you paying $150 to lie,
Right.
all right, good for you.
Yeah.
I think we just talked about that recently.
It's people not wanting to like own, they're lying to themselves, really, is what it is. It's like, if I say that out loud, it's real.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like therapy's exhausting, you know,
Mhm.
if you're really doing the work and being honest. And I think sometimes it's like a good therapist also, after they've gotten to know you, will hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like that sometimes. I don't like it. It doesn't, but I do it because I know it needs to be done. Like, constructive criticism is the way.
My therapist has changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love
A
her.
good therapist goes a long way.
100%.
I don't know if we touched on this or not, but I put a question in at the bottom here, and I said, for someone who doesn't believe in energy healing, how would you encourage them to give Reiki a try? So I guess that's more for like, what would you say to like a skeptic?
That's a great question. I think at this point in my process, like, if you aren't if I don't,
It's kind of like what we just
it's
said.
not my
like
job
if
to
it's-
convince you.
Yeah,
you
if
know?
it's not something you're interested in, then it's
That's
not going to help
fine.
you.
Yeah,
Just how we
and-
said about therapy.
And I think like to that, I would just say like, hey, listen, you know, if it's a no for you, it's a no for you.
Mhm.
And that's totally cool. Like, thank you for being honest about that, because like, I'm not interested in asking anyone to believe what I believe. I'm not interested in trying to convince you. Like, back to me saying how I've always been this way, like, these things are like how I perceive the world. I have a crazy story about I was a friend of mine daydreaming about him being with him when he told me his mom had died. Who daydreams about that kind of stuff? And then like literally a week later, he called me and he's like, I just found out my mom's been dead for 2 months. He had an estranged relationship with her. But my point is like, this is just how I experience the world. I'm not like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? And I'm like, this is just what happens for me. And so for people that don't believe it, that's totally fine. Like, that's how you're experiencing your life. So be respectful to me. I'll be respectful to you. If you're skeptical, but you're open to it, then what I would say is things like, everything about our body conducts on energy. Your nervous system is electrical impulses. Your heartbeat is electrical impulses. You and most people, whether they believe in spirituality and stuff like that or not, you know when you've walked past a room people have been fighting. You know. You can feel it. I saw like a National Geographic article about like what energy does someone emit, and I think they were speaking more like physiologically, like your heart rate starts to get up when you're angry, but that people can perceive that. If you have any sense in believing that is true, then maybe just be open to trying it. And if nothing happens, nothing happens. And I love like being in this area because I've had a few men come in who just like unpronounced, unprovoked, just kind of like, I want to try it. I just want to know what's up. And sometimes they're like, some of it hits, some of it doesn't, because, you know, like a lot of it can be metaphorical too. So there is definitely like if you're coming to me to like prove something to you, you're coming in antagonistically and you're already coming in saying you don't believe it. So
we're not in the correct mindset.
Yeah. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, when you were 5, your grandma said, that's not how it works, you know? And I also,
it's like someone being like, all right, show me what you got. And then just like sitting back like this. It's just very closed off. And it's like, I don't feel good in this space right now.
The other thing too is I think there's like a misconception about what this work is too. I remember we had these neighbors when we lived in our first apartment, and they were like shit talking. The girl worked for a physical therapist, and she was like shit talking how she did Reiki. And she was like, yeah, she does that like faith healing. And I love my Aries husband because he was like, oh, Callista does that. You know?
Yeah.
Just right away. And she's really good. But what I realize is like there's all these misconceptions too. Like, I'm not like, oh, you want to have a baby? Well, I'm going to lay my hand on you and you'll be pregnant next month. You know, I'm not selling people that. I also am a big advocate for like, I've been to really good intuitives who have accurately predicted something psychically. I've had experiences where I'm being shown something and it does happen, but I think we have free will and the future isn't fixed. So I also think there's this aspect of like energy work is reading what is present now. So when you start getting into these spaces of like, I'm supposed to tell you everything that's ever happened to you and everything that will ever happen to you, or I believe I can like somehow magically make something happen, that's where I'm like, that's a little inaccurate. And I think there should be a bit more caution around those types of intuitive workers. And so that's something else I would say to a skeptic is like, it's just an opportunity for you to sit with yourself. And I find that a lot of what I do is like, I'm like a mirror reflecting you back to you so you can see yourself. And that I think helps some people who maybe are a little more apprehensive. Because again, it's like, God, you watch a movie on TV and they're like, the death card came out. Oh my God, someone's going to die. And it's like, that is never what the death card means.
Yeah. That came up last night.
Yeah. Wait.
At the pool show.
We saw a pool.
We
Actually,
went to
you
a-
would have
we went to a
freaking loved what we did
tarot-themed
last
pool
night.
show.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's
And
so
they
fun.
were different. They were representing the different cards. And
That's
the
cool.
MC, they were announcing the next performer and they were doing the death card. And they were like, does anyone know what the death card means? And then they like clarified and they were like, most people pull this card and they're like, I'm going to die. And that's not what it is. And like did a whole speech about it. It was cool.
Yeah, and
very
I'm
cool.
sure like there are somebody like out there. Like I remember the day my dog suddenly died in 2019, and that morning I had pulled from an oracle deck, not from the tarot deck, but it was like the card for bereavement and remembrance. And I was like, I wonder what that's all about. And then my dog died, and I was like, fuck. But I've definitely pulled cards, and then something has happened but death rarely is going to come forward. But this is like, I don't think spirit, especially if you're talking to like capital S spirit, not just any homie that's out there, it's never about fear. It's always about love and compassion. And so I find that like, you're rarely going to have spirit come up and be like, yo, you're going to die today. Have fun. You know? And so, yeah, I love that.
Well, we touch a little bit more onto tarot?
Yeah.
Because we
I
talked
brought
about
my deck if you want me
Reiki.
to like pull a card for listeners.
Oh my God, we should do
Because I didn't know
that.
you guys said if I wanted to do like an exercise for people.
Yeah, that was, I like added that in the end.
That could be really cool.
So we should definitely do that.
Okay.
Let's first talk about what tarot is, I guess, or because we talked about what Reiki is, and then I'm sure there's people that I've heard of tarot, have way too many misconceptions. The tarot, the tarot deck. So I'll let you.
Okay, so
go.
again, everybody has their own belief, but forever needs to hear this. You can buy your own tarot deck.
I need to hear that.
Oh my God, Amanda did need to hear
People
that.
are like, oh, it has to be given to you. And I'm like, what kind of gatekeeping is that? You know, don't get me wrong. There are things that like I know in witchcraft are like closed practices and you need to like culturally learn it or like, and I'm here for that. Like, please stick to your culture. Like, you know, when I do shamanic stuff, I'm like very much aligned with like what is Celtic shamanism versus like indigenous shamanism. But you can buy your own tarot deck. Okay. Like that's one that always gets to me. So the tarot originally was made to be a playing card game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like I believe it was like French, and I don't remember what century. I want to say like 16th or 15th, and then it became a tool of divination as time evolved, you know, and spiritualism became, you know, like more popular and things like that. So I'm sure many different people will answer this question differently, but for my personal belief system, factually, it's a 72 card deck, if I'm recalling correctly, 22 major arcana and whatever 50. Is that mathing? Minor arcanas. So the taking the majors out of the deck, it's basically like reflective of like your playing card deck where there's 4 suits and there's an ace through king. So fun fact, like if you had playing cards in front of me, I could read them like tarot cards.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's cool. So
Cool.
so there's the major and minor, and then in the minor, you know, you have your court cards and you have your all of that. The major arcana, I always say to people metaphorically, to me is more indicative of like seasons. And I do like to say too to people, for full transparency, I studied a lot under Lindsay Mack. She has a podcast and a company called Tarot for the Wild. I always get her and Kim Kranz. One is the Wild Unknown and one's, oh my God, just Google Lindsay Mack. Lindsay with an A. I'm so sorry. I'm like, what is her?
Maybe we can put it in the show notes. Like,
Let's do that. I'll give you this so you can throw her work in because she's incredible. And when I came across her work, I already was having like a disconnect from how people view cards. And I felt like nobody was like, I wasn't finding someone that viewed them how I viewed them. And then I started to find her work and I was like, oh my gosh, somebody like, this is exactly what I think. Like, she's incredible. And like she's like, she says that she's soul-based tarot, and it's just very beautiful and it's very healing, and it's very like tarot should be used like for the now and present. And she's a big advocate for like inclusive work. So like cards should be able to be read inclusively. So there's like this dismantling and breaking down of like, this is always man, this is always a relationship kind of. So anyways, just have to give her credit where credit's due. But the major arcana is more, that's like your fool, devil, you know, those are like bigger energies. And I'll always say those major arcana cards are more like seasons and like energies to surrender to. Like they're bigger life lessons. They're happening whether you like it or not. They are like, if a major comes up, it can kind of be like Spirit's way of guiding you into like, hey, this is a bit more robust or deeper of something that we're moving through. And then the minors, we have the court cards, the page to the king, and those I look at kind of like things to embody or ways to work with that element. And then you have the rest of the minors too, your like ace through your 10, if you will. And those are more kind of like your days, if you will. Like they're more like, they just kind of can come in to be like, hey, like, you know, ponder on this, think about this, show up with this type of medicine. So that's kind of just how the deck functions. And then, like I said, you know, this is like a totally other soapbox I won't get too much into, but I think both in tarot and in astrology, there's a lot of like black and white things that I think are like patriarchy. What's the word I'm looking for?
Patriarchal, yeah.
Influenced, where there are like people see a card and they're like, oh my gosh, like the 3 of Swords. They're like, this is, someone's going to betray you. And that's like what this traditional meaning is. And I don't find that that card ever comes forward for me to cue me that someone's going to betray me. Like almost always comes forward to cue that there is an intellectual element that is perpetuating my heartbreak, that I'm overthinking or that I'm reviewing it too much. Or so I think that's also something to note about the tarot is that everybody can view the deck differently.
Yeah.
All 72 cards to me feel like individual people. And similar to that like comment about, you know, these astrological and tarot spaces where it's black or white, I like really break away from all of that because I'm like, just because somebody has a placement in a sign or a tarot card comes forward, it's like there's many ways that energy can show up. And so I think that that's also something too when you're reading the tarot is you're kind of like feeling into like, what are these cards like? What kind of story do they tell when they're together? What kind of energy do these like friends have when they get together? Like what do they do for each other? There's like all these kind of complex ways you can build upon it. I think, as I was saying, I think spirit communicates through the subconscious. So I think having things like a tarot deck is a great way to just kind of review, like, what do you feel and see in there?
Yeah.
And like that can give you more insight to what's going on inside you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
That's how I always describe tarot to people that are like, why do you do that? Because I love pulling a tarot card or doing, me and my roommate are just like, what should we do tonight? We're like, oh, let's like pull cards and like watch a show.
Yeah.
And I just feel like it's self-reflection every time. It's like, it's your subconscious coming forward and that's your ability to reflect on that.
I love doing it with a group of people too, because then it brings up conversations and then you can talk about it. And it's kind of cool in that sense.
Yeah. And you can definitely like have a deck like for journal prompts, like pull a card and like, what does that card make you feel? What do you think about it? What does it evoke in you? Like,
I've never done that.
Yeah. You know, if it's something like for me, like over years of connecting with the deck, I evolved into like having this ability to like see symbolism and like know that spirit is communicating and like what they're communicating and why. But I think all of that, that's like another thing I would comment for people who are listening to this is I think that sometimes when people start to get into stuff like this, they're like, balls to the wall. Like, I got to do it all now. And I'm like, this is a process. It unravels over time. You're not meant to intimately understand every way all 72 cards can show up within 1 year of getting a deck. Like, it doesn't, how, like, you guys have known each other how long now? And you're probably still learning about each other all the time. And every couple of years, like, things change. Your lives are going to change, you know? And so same, like the way I view the cards and the way I work with the cards and how they show up in my life has evolved. So I'm also like, it's a practice. Slow down a little bit. It's a practice. You don't have to like do it all, learn it all, know it all right now. Just start somewhere.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think it's really a validating thing to say because I bet there's a lot of people that are like, I want to know tarot, but I don't know everything, but they want to start doing readings for people and stuff like that. Too.
Like, I know people are like, I'm reading tarot. And then like 2 weeks later, they're like, I'm doing shamanism. And then like a week later, they're like, I'm doing crystal medicine. I'm going and doing ayahuasca. And I'm like, it's cool to like, and I was there, so I get it. I'm like, it's, you know, it's exciting. Unravel.
Yeah.
And like, I'm also a big advocate for like I was saying before, like your real life is just as spiritual as your spiritual life. It's cool to do all that. And it's also cool that I read like my shadow daddy fairy smut. Like, you know, like
100%.
And it's also cool that I then am a mom and I'm like playing in the park with my kids and I'm doing like, mommy monster, you know, in the house. Like it's all part of it. It's
totally.
Yeah, I think that a big thing that because I graduated from PT school, I was like, okay, now I'm a healthcare professional. That is who I am. And that is so limiting very self-limiting. And that's why I made a post on my Instagram recently that was like, I can be a pole dancer and I can also be a healthcare practitioner. You can also be a mom. You can also read tarot. Like you can do all of these things. Like just because you are a medical professional doesn't mean you are just that version of yourself. And what Amanda said to me was the fact that you have all of these other aspects to you and how you practice makes you so much more niche. And that's why people want to come to you.
100%.
And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I remember I worked for a male doctor. I learned a lot from him, so I have a lot of gratitude for him, but he was very, like, metric orientated and very, like, you can't put that up because what will patients think, or if you post that, or you should take that down. And again, I think that's like that very like masculine dominated energy, whereas like there's like something I'm trying to do is bring this like divine feminine more into like business and corporate spaces. Like, and so I'm like, I show up in my business, like I'm who I am on this podcast is who I am at home is who I am in my office. And what I'm not going to hide who I am. I'm not doing anything illegal. I'm not doing anything wrong. I even sometimes like will post jokes about like marijuana use, and I'm like, I'm not using marijuana, I'm going to work. Like I'm going home at the end of the day and maybe sharing a joint with my partner, and there's nothing wrong about that. It's legal. And so if somebody doesn't want to come to me because I read tarot and I occasionally smoke weed, like we're probably not going to vibe. And the other thing too, I think that's fortunate for people like us is I'm not looking to see 125 patients a week, and I'm looking to work with like 10 people to 15 people a day intimately. When I'm doing readings, I can't do more than like 3 or 4 a day. And so I'm like, I want you to know that when you sit before me, I am all about you, and that is all that I'm thinking about. And in the flip side of that, you get to know who I really am.
Totally.
And I think people want that. And
yeah, I think
like
transparency, it makes sense for how the world's evolving too. And on my walk over here, I was just thinking about that. I asked Hannah today if a picture we took last night was like too raunchy to post on our Instagram account, because it's like it's so good. It's like her like trying to give like pretending to give me a vampire bite, which is like a tattoo, and it's like on my boob, and she's like, and it's awesome. It's iconic. We're gonna post it. But like, I was like, is that crazy? Because like we work together in a professional setting, and like I'm technically your boss, and like there's like all this stuff that we have to worry about. But it's like, this is awesome for our podcast advertising and like our brand for that. And no one talks about what professionalism is when what you do for work is something that people like won't talk about because it's taboo, because it deals with intimate body parts. And it's like, we have to talk about sex all day, every day with each other at the clinic to even do continuing education. So like, what is professionalism in that case?
I also think there's like, who benefits from us being so sterile? It's not us as workers. It's the people at the top who make the big paychecks, who don't want you to share details like who gets paid what. And, you know, I think some of these things, like most of the people I work with who are stressed and they're like unhappy in their life are struggling with like this dichotomy or like this juxtaposition of like, this is who I have to show up for work and this is who I really am. And we spend so much time at work. It really like, it's sad, like it shouldn't be your whole life, but it really is where you spend most of your time. So I think this continued aspect of like being authentic and honest with who you are only benefits the world. Whereas like, who benefits when we pretend to be like this sterile and then we lose the connection in the community. Like that whole like community orientated way of being and like honoring and really knowing each other is lost in the sterilizations.
Totally. Yeah.
And
corporate America.
And so, you know, death to it.
Death to all.
Death hard. That's so funny. No, it's so real. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, that's the vision. That's the goal, is just to like spread more of that into the world and that thought process. So this is awesome. This is like one of my favorite conversations we've ever had.
I knew it was going to be like this. I had
no doubts. I was like, this is going to be great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love it.
I have a couple of questions on different things we've touched on.
Oh, shoot.
And also just like random stuff that I want to know.
Hell yeah.
So
take it away, queen.
Before I ask this question, Reiki deals with the 7 chakras, right? Or
a lot of the times you will see the relationship with the two. I might be speaking out of turn, you know, if there's any keyboard warriors listening, but you know, when the chakras are like Indian in culture, if I'm not mistaken. And then Reiki's Japanese. So I don't know like when or where the two.
Okay.
But you do see a lot of people teaching it with the relationship of both. So, and I personally, how I like to do it is like go through each energy center and the whole body. So yes, like a lot of the times, yes. Traditionally, culturally, I don't know when that started.
Right. And if that's the right label for it.
Yeah.
To combine with Reiki. Okay. My question on that is to make this maybe more palatable for people listening for like pelvic floor reasons. What is the relationship? Like when you're doing a Reiki session with someone, are you working through that pelvic energy center, or what some people would call the sacral chakra? And are you seeing anything or feeling anything that has, for people you've worked with chiropractically, made sense in terms of like a pelvic floor dysfunction or something that you would then refer out or treat yourself? I don't know if I'm wording that well.
I've got a great way to answer this. For whatever reason, kind of sidebar, but relates to the question, Spirit loves to tell me when people are on their period. Every single time I read and Spirit shows me menstrual or like period blood, they'll be like, I'm on my period just ended. I'm on my period. And I'm like, I don't know. They really love to tell me when people are on their period. But anyways, so I think the best way to think about it, or how I find, is I wouldn't say, oh my gosh, I'm sensing like a lack of creativity in your sacral and that's why your pelvic floor is tight. I don't work like that. I really think like evidence-based. Like I'm in my Gemini way, I'm dual natured, right? I'm like, let's talk about what we can actually find and research and prove. And then I've got the side that's like the spirit side. So how I build the relationship or think the two relate more would be more beneficial with like someone like you first seeing this person has pelvic floor dysfunction. Is it birth trauma? Is it sexual dysfunction? Is it sexual assault related? And then I could come in and say, okay, how is that sexual dysfunction impacting how you feel creatively, how you feel about yourself? Do you feel safe in your body? Do you feel like you can communicate? Do you feel like you can connect? Same with birth trauma or sexual trauma. So I think the relationship more relates to, I don't want to say like they're going to come in and I'm going to heal all the stuff that's going on. I don't think it works that way, but I think they come in and this is a soft, safe space for them to be able to digest and understand like, oh, wow, like, yeah, I am still carrying this, or I didn't realize like my sexual trauma was showing up in how I even consciously communicate or how I view my future. And they're able to sort of then have some more clarity and softness and understanding brought into like, well, what am I holding on to energetically? And then I think sometimes, you know, especially with like birth and birth trauma, like I had birth trauma. So when I was so scared I was going to die when I had my second baby. I almost like, oh, sorry. I shouldn't apologize.
No, definitely not. My gosh.
I almost was going to cry, but I was so scared I was going to die because my first birthing experience was terrible. So I was doing a lot of work on myself and receiving Reiki just to be able to reaffirm to my physical body, to my emotional body, to my spirit, to my subconscious, that it was safe for me to portal life into this world once again. And I had a beautiful, Damien's birth was beautiful as everything, every birth should ever be. It was beautiful. And I'm so grateful. But that's something I talk to a lot of women when they've had birth trauma, that they are horrified to have another baby because they're like, and a lot of times it's this like guilt of like, if I die and leave my kids, like why I already had kids, you know? So I think sometimes working on the root and the sacral, where this is where the physiological issue happened. The root is where the pelvic floor and the pelvic bowl and the, you know, we've got the root chakra and the sacral chakra in that area of the body. And the root can govern like our feelings of safety and security, stability. It's also like money, body, physical stuff. It's like the hierarchy and needs stuff, like am I fed, am I clothed, and then the sacral is where we start to get into emotional expression. And so just as like a fun fact, it's really thinking about this like through child development too, of what we like, first we get physical form, then we get in our terrible twos where we're like emotions are, and then we get into like solar plexus around 3 where we're like, I want it this way. And that's kind of like how it develops. And so just thinking about that sort of from the perspective of like the energy where it could come in and support someone who's going through pelvic floor dysfunction in a space of like, well, what does this relate to? And does it relate to like feeling safe and grounded in the body? Or does it relate to feeling safe and grounded in the sensuality, sexuality, or even in how you create, how you move? Like in the throat, we get creation through expression. And in the sacral, we get creation through ideas and emotion. And so I think hopefully that answered your question. But I kind of think that that's more where there's a relationship. I'm not going to be like Reikiing someone. I may, you know, and feel like, hey, you know what, it might help you to have pelvic floor therapy.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure you're
definitely.
like not surprised by things that end up revealing themselves in the patient's plan of care otherwise, or in another area of care, but it's not a diagnostic tool. It's kind of what you're getting
100%.
at. Yeah.
And I use it more. I would encourage someone to use it more to make it easier for them to access what they want to access. So if that's like safety, confidence, like Reiki can come in and help remove some of those energetic blocks without you having to necessarily like relive the whole experience.
Yeah.
And it can kind of just shine a light on. Sometimes I do get, they need to do this. And sometimes it's diet. Sometimes it's nutrition. I think that's more because I'm educated in that. Sometimes it's like, okay, so every full moon I need you to, you know, or sometimes I'm like, have you ever thought about working with a deity?
Oh my gosh.
And I have to tell people like who came forward. But yeah. It's
That
not
is so cool.
something I'm using diagnostically, but it is definitely something I think it could support very well the emotional aspect of the things that you guys are working on physically.
Yeah, no, that definitely answers it. And that's helpful for us when we like refer out to something like Reiki, just to have a little background on what you could be doing with them. Thank you for sharing.
I wanted to say too about that is like, especially people with like sexual dysfunction or assault history, sometimes Reiki is so beautiful because it's clothed and I'm laying on of hands. So you get this like intimate, but not sexual, not penetrative, just the intimacy of letting someone else kind of like really see you and be touched in a way that's just about like comfort and love without. And I think that is like,
It's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cry again.
Oh my God, that made me want to
Let's just
cry.
have a group cry.
It's like, what's up?
There are times when patients with those previous experiences come into our clinic and it's like we don't have to do internal work right away. Sometimes it is a buildup, which is really beautiful too, because we can still work with you and help you heal and not have to like jump right in. Like when you go to a gynecologist, it's like speculum exam, let's go. It's not anything like that. It's all for you and your healing process at the end of the day, and you guide the session, which is really beautiful. And then implementing Reiki in that sense and knowing that it's a safe space is really important to note.
Yeah. I actually, when I talk and refer people to you, I always tell them like, I've actually been way more uncomfortable with the gynecologist than I ever have at any internal work you were doing.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, it's really like, to me, like less invasive in a lot of ways.
This is a common experience for a lot of our patients.
Yeah.
They describe it and they're like, I didn't know it would be like that. It was so different. So that's why we were like, we need to do more episodes just talking about what our internal exam even looks like so that people really know. But I think like we get so emotional talking about this stuff because as women, we've all had experience. I mean, most women I know have had an unpleasant experience in their life. And like just knowing that there are providers out there who care and provide that safe space. It's just something that not everyone gets. And so it makes me emotional to think about them not receiving that. And it's like, we just want everyone to have that.
Absolutely. We're out here doing the work.
We're doing
the
work.
We're changing the system.
Hopefully changing the system. That would be awesome.
I think what makes though, not to toot our own horns, but toot. What makes us good at the work that we do is like we're doing the work ourselves. Like I'm not telling people to go to pelvic floor and have never had pelvic floor therapy.
Totally.
Also, I'm not telling people the things that I am in sessions and not going home and struggling with it myself. Like I also am very honest and transparent with people that like I have OCD and I have an anxiety disorder and like I take medication for that. And I also still meditate. And I also, you know, and it's like there is a relationship where like these things are beautiful and they're not always like, it's okay. You can be messy and it's just, are you in your healing? Are you working on yourself? Are you practicing awareness? And I think that that's what makes us so good at what we do. And why people feel so connected is because they can tell like there's this honest authenticity and it's not like a put on show.
Yeah. It's not something you can fake.
No.
Yeah. We're human beings at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Oh, this was so cool. I have an unrelated question. I have one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
It's not about anything we've talked about thus far, but it is spiritual.
Okay.
I've been seeing angel numbers up the waz lately. Like every time I look at the clock, every time I look at the washing machine, like things that aren't time, like in the chronological
Like
way. We
you might
see it
even
day
see
to
them on,
day.
like
Like,
license plates or like a bus
yeah,
or
it's
something.
just, they're everywhere. Like, what
do you
is your
see?
take on that? I see 444, 333, 222.
Love it.
Those are the main ones.
I've been
777 also.
I've just been
I
seeing
think that's fun.
111 out the waz and 222.
So, I mean, I think that angel numbers first and foremost are like, did you guys have DARE program when you were kids? Did they still do that?
Yeah.
I'm so glad that they're like not doing it anymore because I think it's kind of terrible in a lot of ways. But anyways, I digress. I feel like angel numbers are the gateway drug to the spiritual, just like to spiritual practices, because most people comment on noticing that first. And maybe that's also because it's like so popular in the zeitgeist, but I do believe that spirit communicates in symbolism. And that's something you'll hear like a lot of people say. So whether it's numbers, numerology, or sometimes I will ask a question and like turn the radio on and like there'll be like a line in the song and I'm like, whoa, you know, or you'll walk by people having a conversation and hear what they're saying. Like once you start paying attention to it, it's everywhere all the time. It's wild. And so yes, I do think that has validity. I think that different numerical patterns can like have different messages. There's many resources online. You can read what people say, but I think it's just most important with anything spiritual to just figure out what it means for you. But for a lot of people, like the 111, I think is like, I feel like most commonly that comes up to be like, just be mindful of your thoughts because you're manifesting as you think, as you speak, you know, and it's just, are you communicating what you want? Like 333 is like major ascended master energy to me. So that's like, you know, your Buddha, your Jesus, I can't even remember who all the Kuan Yin, you know, people that are considered ascended masters and just like that consciousness. I've personally gotten twos a lot as spirit's way of saying like I'm on the right life path. I've personally been being like the ascending patterns have been coming for me a lot. The 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4, 5, 6, the 6, 7, 8. And I have been having like up leveling where I'm like moving up on my purpose, my plan, whatever I'm doing, you know? So yes, love that.
Cool.
Yeah. Let's pull a card.
Let's pull a card. Yay.
So,
And is this for the pelvic freaks or is this for like us here right now?
I think
Should we do it for the pelvic freaks?
Let's do it for the freaks.
Let's do it for the freaks.
We're pulling a card for you guys.
Yeah.
A special
Just some
treat.
like little universal message, collective message for the pelvic freaks. What they can take away from this episode.
Yay.
Okay.
I love the sounds of the card
The shuffling. Yeah,
It's
let's
very
see what
relaxing.
wants to come out.
Some
This is
ASMR.
oh, there we go. We'll take that and we'll take, oh, I love it. We'll take them both. Okay.
Yay.
So we got the Chariot and the Four of Cups.
Okay.
So the Chariot speaks to the internal work we do, manifesting externally. So it's back to Lindsay Mack, she says it's not called the Charioteer for a reason. So that's something I'll mention a lot because it's really like about the vessel. Like it's about that the figure's in on the card. So I find that it really speaks more to these times in our life where like a lot of times traditionally too, there's an element of self-mastery that people will interpret from this card. So I think it really speaks to these times in our life where like something internally has changed or we're doing the work internally. And it's about how the external world and environment starts to change to meet that internal work we've done. And then we have the Four of Cups with that. So I think what really this message about her is coming forward for anyone who's listening and has made it this far with us is it's so important to sit with what is, to be with what is emotionally present before worrying about what you're grabbing for and reaching for next. And like the way to create the most change in your external world is to be with, digest, and process with what's within.
Cool.
I feel like I needed to
That
hear
was
too.
like everything we talked about today too.
That
Yeah.
was.
Awesome. Oh my
Wow, what a
gosh.
good ending to this. So
This was like seriously
I loved it. Thank you.
maybe
for
my
having
favorite
me.
episode so far.
Oh, I know.
This is awesome. Also, I know we have talked for ages already today, but like we have to have you back on at some point because like there were certain things that you said where I was like, I have so many questions about that. I have so many
You
questions
know
about
what?
that.
We're probably
I
gonna
don't
have
even
to-
know what that means.
We're gonna have to do like specifically like this is the topic of this episode, and
Yeah.
then really delve into that topic.
We
'cause I
definitely
feel like we
could,
could have some good
definitely could.
conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
This is so
I
awesome.
can just be like your reoccurring guest.
Yeah,
If you want.
100%.
Yes,
We'll have
coming
you on.
back.
And I'm
love
sure some of our pelvic freaks listening will have questions.
Yeah.
too.
Sure.
So
Tell them where we can find you.
1169 West Madison. Across the street. No, websites revivechiropractichealing.com. Had to say that really slow.
Thank you.
www.revivechiropractichealing.com. We're on Instagram at Revive Chiro Chicago. And I'm located in the West Loop right across from your practice. So, and
Amazing.
I do remote as well as in person for the intuitive work.
Yeah, definitely.
I wish I would have said in your dreams where they can find me.
Oh, yes.
You can redo it.
No, I'm fine.
We're keeping that in.
We can cut it so that that's what you said first. Yes, absolutely. Give them a follow. They're amazing. We refer over to Revive all the time. Make sure you're following us at Pelvic POV. And in our bio, you can find links to submit a question, join our newsletter. And if anything came up in this episode that you have questions about, you can submit it there.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, pelvic freaks.
Bye, pelvic
Bye, pelvic freaks.